Hey, Broccoli fam. Big announcement. I have started a new audio-only channel. For those of you who like to listen to their horror stories, do check it out once. I am sure you would love it. Putting the link in the description box. Love you all.
I worked at the same insurance company for 5 years. It wasn't a perfect job, but I didn't have any problems. I liked my coworkers and never had to take my work home with me. Unfortunately, everything changed about a month ago when our supervisor retired. He'd hired his nephew Mark as a replacement, and Mark was absolutely terrible. He was in his early 20s and had no idea what he was doing. He tried to make all these changes that just caused more work and more confusion for me and my coworkers. He introduced a new online platform that we had to use, which meant that we basically had to enter all the information twice. A task that should have taken 15 minutes to complete ended up taking over an hour. And slowly, I started working overtime without getting paid for it. Normally, I took the files home with me and did the extra work on my home computer. But last weekend, the electricity at my house went out and I had to go back to the office to finish everything before Monday. It was about 10 at night and the whole building was completely empty. We should have had a security guard outside the building, but I didn't see him when I walked in. I sat at my desk and started finishing off my work. I thought it would take me an hour, but I ended up staying there until about midnight before I finally finished everything. I printed out all the copies I needed and was putting them back in their folders when I heard the door open. Because I was going through the drawers, I was crouched on the ground and didn't see who had entered. I peered over my cubicle wall and saw Mark walk in with a woman. He had his arms around her shoulder and they were talking and laughing. The woman wore an extremely short red dress and had thick, trashy makeup. She looked like you know what. I was so shocked and embarrassed to see the two of them together that I stayed crouched on the ground so that they wouldn't see me. I figured it would be best if I stayed hidden until they went into his office. I knew that I just found out Mark's secret and could use this information to my advantage. But I wasn't that kind of person. Even if Mark made my life miserable, I would never blackmail him over it. I stayed there for about 5 minutes as Mark led this woman through the office and gave her a tour of the place. The way he talked to her made it seem like he was some big shot instead of the manager of a tiny insurance company. All the woman said were things like, "Wow," and "That's incredible." Then, I heard a door close and their voices faded away. He had taken her into his office. This was my opportunity to sneak out of there before he saw me. Crouching low to the ground, I crept back toward the exit. I had to walk past his office door on my way, which meant that I heard their voices on the other side of the wall. I reached for the handle to the front door and tried to open it without making a sound, when I heard a scream coming from Mark's office. It was a scream of pain. I froze in place, my hand still on the doorknob, as I heard Mark angrily shout, "Shut up!" Then, there was a loud thud and the woman's screaming stopped. After that, there was only silence. I couldn't see what happened, thank God, but it definitely sounded like Mark had gotten violent with that woman. It sounded like he'd killed her. Mark's office door slowly creaked open. I realized that I didn't have enough time to get out of the building without Mark seeing me. So, I flattened myself onto the floor and crawled behind one of the cubicles. I peered around the edge of the cubicle as Mark walked backward out of his office. He was dragging the woman's body toward the exit. She was definitely dead. As he dragged her, he kept muttering under his voice. "It was an accident," he said. "It's not my fault." I held my breath so that he wouldn't hear me. Mark slowly opened the front door and started dragging that poor woman into the lobby. Once they were gone, I was finally able to breathe again. I gasped in air, but it was too soon, because Mark instantly ran back inside and shouted, "Who's there?" He knew that I was hiding somewhere. I could hear his footsteps pound through the office, looking around each of the cubicles. It was only a matter of time before he found me. I had to act fast. Just as he walked toward my hiding place, I jumped up and shoved the water cooler onto its side. Water splashed everywhere. It didn't hurt Mark, but it distracted him long enough to run past him and out the door. I had to step over that woman's body before I reached the front of the building. My hands shaking, I pulled my ID card out of my pocket. I needed to scan it before the door would open. Mark ran toward me, not saying a word. He grabbed me just as I got the doors to open. I twisted out of his grip and raced into the parking lot. I knew he'd catch me before I could get inside my car, so I ran right past him. I had to get to the main road. Even in the middle of the night, there were always cars on the road. Mark would never be able to stop me with so many witnesses driving by. I skidded to a stop when I reached the sidewalk. With a huge stroke of luck, a police car was driving by at that exact moment. I waved my arms in the air to get its attention, and the car made a U-turn and came back for me. I looked over my shoulder, but Mark was no longer there. He'd given up on the chase. I told the policeman that I just witnessed a murder. He called in backup and then followed me back toward the office. When we went back inside, Mark was gone. So was the body. All that was left was a streak of blood running across the floor. Work has been canceled since this all happened. The police are still looking for Mark, but I'm pretty sure they'll find him. He doesn't seem smart enough to stay hidden for long. Still don't know why he killed that poor woman. I just hope that I never have to see him again.
I was alone at my office for the entire weekend, while my coworkers were at some team-building retreat up in the mountains. It was mandatory for the entire staff to go, including me, but I convinced my boss to let me stay behind and catch up on our quarterly reports. I would much rather stare at my computer all day than do a bunch of trust activities with a group of coworkers who didn't even like me. I'm a total introvert, but sometimes that comes across as rude. My boss, Stan, seemed honestly relieved when I told him that I would stay behind. It was the middle of the day and I was filling out spreadsheets on my computer. I'd been in it for hours and I really needed a break. I left my desk and started walking around the office just to stretch my legs. I thought about my coworkers, who were probably in the middle of some dumb game up in the mountains. The whole office was really quiet until a notification beep came from my computer. It was the sound I got whenever someone sent a personal message using the office's internal systems. We use those kinds of messages for work-related issues, and they could only be accessed from inside the building. The only way I'd get a message like that is if someone else was in the building with me. That thought made the hairs on the back of my neck stand. Our building was split into 2 floors, and since I didn't see anyone when I came in, that must mean that someone was using one of the computers upstairs. I ran over to my computer and clicked on the message box at the bottom of the screen. It said the message was sent from Stan, my boss. But it couldn't be him, because he was off in the mountains. But at least I knew which computer it was sent from. The message said, "Get out of the building." Chills ran down my spine. Who would send something like this? I typed in my reply, "Who are you?" A response came immediately. "A friend." I wrote back, "Why do you want me to get out of the building?" It took a little longer in response to come in this time. It said in all caps, "Get out now." That response told me everything. Someone was upstairs doing something illegal, probably stealing money or documents. They came here today because they knew that everyone would be gone from the office. Whoever this person was, they must have realized that I was still here and used the messages to get me to leave. I'd worked for this company for 2 years, and even though I mostly stuck to myself, I'd always been proud of the work I'd done. I felt loyal to the company, and I didn't want this creep to get away with whatever he was doing. So against my own common sense, I decided to walk upstairs and confront him myself. As soon as I reached the 2nd floor, I started to have second thoughts. I should have contacted the police before I came up here, but it was too late now. I had to be quiet until I reached Stan's office door. All the windows were drawn and the lights were out, but I could see the blue glow from Stan's computer. I walked toward the door, expecting to hear someone rifling through papers on the other side, but I didn't. Everything was deathly quiet. I took a deep breath and then pushed the door open. I don't know what I expected to see, but I definitely didn't expect an empty office. No one was in here, and the blue glow from the computer was because of its screensaver. I double-checked that the room was empty, and then I clicked on the computer mouse. I didn't need to type in a password. Instantly, I saw the blueprints of the building pop up on screen. I opened his messenger and saw that the strange messages hadn't come from him after all. His most recent messages were from the night before, between him and his business partner, Steve. I was about to forget about this whole thing and go back downstairs when I noticed something strange about the messages between them. Stan is usually very direct, but these messages seemed to be some sort of code. They were actually about some kind of plan for today. He used phrases like, the event, and when it happened, without actually explaining what they were planning to do. Then I noticed my name in the chat. What about Gloria? Steve asked. And Stan's reply, collateral damage. I had no idea what was going on, but it didn't sound good. I snapped a photo of the computer screen and left the room, grabbed my purse, and walked right out of the building. I still had a lot of work to do, but I couldn't concentrate. I was too freaked out by the strange messages and too offended by Stan's comment. Exactly at noon, I got in my car. I was about to drive off. Right in front of me, the building exploded. Pieces of the walls flew through the air. One big chunk of the building crashed down onto the hood of my car. I didn't get hurt, thank God. I stepped out of my car and started walking home. I was in shock, I think. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I walked for 20 minutes before I made it home and collapsed on my couch. I was completely numb all over. Less than an hour later, my phone started buzzing with messages and missed calls. I turned on the news and saw a reporter standing in front of the rubble that had once been my office. He said that a gas leak had caused the explosion. He mentioned one casualty, me. I watched in shock as the footage then cut to my boss, Stan, sobbing into the camera. He was still up in the mountains. I don't care about the building. Our insurance will cover everything. But I'm heartbroken about Gloria. She was one of our greatest employees. If only she had come on the retreat with us. My other coworkers stood behind him, looking solemn. I knew my boss well enough to tell when he was lying. He wasn't upset. He knew this was going to happen. He planned it. That's why I saw the building blueprints on his computer. I guess I got over my shock because I called 911 and told them that I was still alive. They sent an officer over and I explained what happened. I told them that the explosion must have been arson. Whether it was for money or something else, Stan had planned to blow up his own building, and he didn't care that I had been inside. The cop didn't believe me until I showed him the photo I took of Stan's computer. They arrested him right after that. I can't believe how close I was to dying. It was a miracle I made it out in time. What I don't understand is who had sent me those messages in the first place. All the computers are destroyed, so there's no way of knowing who really sent them. I guess I'll never know.
I hate my birthday. Always have. Birthdays are meant to be a celebration of someone in their life. But somehow, mine always ended up being about my little brother. This persisted into adulthood. The conversation always revolves around him and what he's doing. I'm lucky even to be acknowledged. Since this is how my birthday goes, I always feel small and worthless. After fading into the background of my own birthday year after year, I decided to celebrate by taking a solo vacation to a mountain spa resort. The night before I left for the resort, I told my mom my itinerary. She wasn't happy I was celebrating by myself and disagreed that my birthday always ends up being about my brother. She started harping on me about it, so I had to ask if she wanted to hear what I was doing or not. She said yes, because it's the only way she can feel involved. I rolled my eyes. I told her I would leave for work on Friday and get to the resort later. I planned to order food and just hang out in the hotel room. Saturday was my spa day. I would spend my birthday being pampered like a queen, far away from my phone. For Sunday, I planned to check out and do an easy hike before heading back to the city. My mom wasn't all that excited for me, but it wasn't her birthday. I remember feeling so much peace as I rolled up to the resort. It was nestled deep in the mountains, and you could see the snow-covered peaks in the distance. It was the beginning of summer, so I was surprised to see that there was still some snow on them. I felt so far away from the drama my family was trying to cause and the hustle of my day-to-day life. Inside of the resort added to my peace. It smelled of fresh wood and was decorated like a cabin. Although it was huge, it felt quaint and cozy. A lady was complaining about the lack of towels that I had to wait behind her before I could check in. I couldn't help but notice the man who came in after me. He stood about a head taller than me and had dark curly hair. There felt like electricity between us as he waited behind me. The lady got her towels and I stepped up to check in. The lady was kind and gave me my room key quickly. I thanked her, and as I turned, I bumped into the gorgeous tall man behind me. "Oh, sorry," I said. I looked up at him, and he had friendly brown eyes that sparkled a bit. "It's okay. I don't mind beautiful women bumping into me." He flashed his big white smile at me, revealing his dimples. I laughed nervously, not knowing how to react. I don't get hit on very often. I bent over to start gathering my stuff, and he helped. "This might be a long shot, and I know it's late, but is there any chance you would want to grab something to eat with me after I check in?" Blood rushed to my cheeks. "Yeah, I could do that. I was just going to eat alone in my room anyway, so some company might be nice." I smiled at him. "Great. Want to meet down here in 45 minutes? I nodded and told him I'd see him in a bit. "What's your name?" I asked before leaving. "Adam. And yours?" "Steph." "I'll see you soon, Steph." He smiled at me one more time. We met in the lobby and he told me he found this Mexican joint with good reviews. I told him how great that sounded, since Mexican is my favorite. I mentioned to him that I was on my birthday vacation. So Adam told the waitress to get free desserts and to ask her not to come out singing because he thought it might make me uncomfortable. I kept being stunned by how he guessed everything right. He ordered a bottle of red wine, which happened to be my favorite. When I eat out at Mexican places, I switch off getting enchiladas and chile rellenos. I got enchiladas last time I was out, and that's what he ordered. I was able to have a bite of my two favorite dishes. We got along so well, too. Adam was a photographer. He was in the mountains to get some nature shots. We had so much in common. I was convinced we had the potential to go somewhere. I almost asked him back to my room, but I didn't want to rush things. Before we said goodnight, we exchanged numbers. He told me he hoped to run into me again before he left. The following day, I woke up, brushed my teeth, and headed to the spa. All day, I was pampered. As they were massaging my feet and arms at the same time, I felt like I made the best decision to celebrate alone. For the first time, I felt good on my birthday. And as a bonus, I met Adam. At that moment, everything felt right. As I was leaving the spa, I saw Adam in the lobby. We stopped and chatted briefly. He invited me to dinner again, and looking into his brown eyes, I wanted so badly to say yes. Except I had a bunch of voicemails and texts I needed to answer. I couldn't block out my loved ones completely. I explained that I needed to call my friends and family, but I suggested we get dinner when we were both back in the city. His eyes lit up at this suggestion. I woke up early the next day for my hike. I planned to return to the hotel after the hike to shower, but I changed my mind. I decided to head home right after the hike. What are the odds? He laughed. We hiked the trail together, stopping now and again so he could take a picture. One time, he turned the camera to me and asked me to smile. We made small talk. Adam asked what I planned to do when I returned to the city. I explained that I would have dinner with my family and how they weren't happy I chose to celebrate alone. Adam's head twitched to the side. They don't understand how lucky they are to have you in their lives. It ticks me off. I hadn't said much about my family, so I didn't know where this came from. As we walked up to the waterfall, he said, "Like 2 years ago, when you wanted to go to that Mediterranean place for your birthday, but for some reason you ended up going to Applebee's. Your brother isn't even that great. He's a Starbucks barista. It just ticks me off." My stomach dropped. How did he know what happened 2 years ago? I definitely didn't mention it. I acted like I didn't hear him, but my guard was up. I started thinking how he was always in the lobby right when I was. He was there when I checked in. He was there when I came out of the spa. He was even there for the hike at the same time as me. He turned to me and said he was going to get closer to snap some pictures. I told him he wouldn't want his backpack to get wet so I could hold on to it. He was hesitant, but ended up giving it to me. Once he was far enough away, I unzipped it. Inside, I found snacks, rope, duct tape, a map, and a small bag containing a white powder. In the small pocket, I found pictures of me. Some looked like they were from years ago. There was one of me brushing my teeth that I have no idea how he could get, unless he hacked into my phone. I checked his wallet and took a picture of his ID. My heart was racing. I slowly put Adam's bag down and started running back down the trail. Luckily, it was a short hike, so I jogged back down to my car. About halfway through, I heard him yell my name. He yelled it again and again, getting angrier with each call out. I got to my car, got in it, and drove away. When I got to the city, I went to the police department immediately. I told them what had happened, what I had found, and his information. They told me as long as there was no assault or trespassing, there wasn't a whole lot they could do. They recommended getting a new phone and laptop because he probably hacked them and to consider relocating. They weren't going to do anything for me. I haven't seen Adam since the waterfall, but I did what the cops told me. I got all new electronics and moved to a new place. I only told a select few where I moved to and started guarding my personal information. I look over my shoulder, check for cars following me, and look for him in grocery stores, but I still haven't seen him. I don't think I'll ever shake this uneasy feeling, because he had been watching me for years without me knowing. So who's to say he's not still watching?
My friends and I had planned a trip for months, looking forward to hiking, exploring, and enjoying the fresh air. I couldn't wait to spend it with them. However, alongside came a rearrangement of my understanding. I never believed in ghosts or spirits. The idea of them always seemed far-fetched, like something surreal. That all changed when I booked an Airbnb for a weekend getaway with my friends. The place seemed perfect. It was a beautiful cabin nestled in the woods, surrounded by trees and the peaceful sounds of nature. It was far from civilization, but that was the whole point. We wanted to escape our busy lives for a while and enjoy some much-needed relaxation. The host, a woman named Karen, seemed nice enough. She greeted us warmly when we arrived. Karen was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She had shoulder-length brown hair that was neatly styled, and wore a simple but elegant dress that seemed to match the aesthetic of the cabin. As she showed us around, I couldn't help but notice how meticulous she was in her preparations. The cabin was spotless, with fresh linens on the beds and a fully stocked kitchen. Karen seemed to have thought of everything. She provided us with a map of the area and recommendations for nearby attractions, and even left us a plate of homemade cookies as a welcoming gift. Overall, Karen struck me as a warm and friendly person, and I felt grateful to have her as our host. Little did I know, things were about to take a dark turn. Maybe it was the one room Karen didn't show us that kept me uneasy. That was her room, but I didn't think it mattered at that moment. After we slept, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone moving around in the kitchen. At first, I thought it was one of my friends getting a midnight snack, but when I got up to check, I found the kitchen empty. I brushed it off as my imagination and went back to bed. But then I heard it again. This time, I was sure it wasn't one of my friends. The sound was too deliberate, too purposeful. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously made my way to the kitchen, heart pounding in my chest. That's when I saw her. A woman, dressed in a white gown, was standing in the middle of the kitchen. She had long flowing hair and a serene expression on her face. I froze, unable to move or speak. The woman turned towards me, her gaze meeting mine. It was then that I realized there was something wrong with her eyes. They were dark, almost black, and filled with malevolent energy that made my blood run cold. I screamed and ran back to my room, waking up my friends in the process. They thought I was crazy, insisting that it was just a nightmare. But I knew what I had seen, and it wasn't just my imagination. The next day, we tried to brush it off and enjoy our weekend, but things only got worse. We started hearing strange noises throughout the cabin, like someone was moving around in the other room or whispering in our ears. Doors would open and close on their own, and we found objects moved from their original position. It was clear that something was wrong with the cabin, but we didn't want to leave. We had paid good money for this getaway and didn't want to cut it short. That was a mistake we would soon regret. One night, we were all gathered around the fireplace, trying to relax after a particularly unsettling day. That's when we heard a knock at the door. It was Karen, our host, looking frantic and scared. She told us that the cabin was cursed and that it was built on sacred ground where a tragedy had occurred many years ago. A family had been murdered in the woods, and their spirits still haunted the land. She begged us to leave, pack our things, and go home the first thing in the morning. That night, we all slept together, but were all woken up by a scream. It was Karen, who had been staying in the room next to ours. We rushed to her room. As we stepped inside, the musty smell of old books and decaying wood filled our nostrils. The decor was outdated and mismatched, with dusty old portraits staring down at us from the walls. There was an old-fashioned fireplace that crackled and popped with sinister energy. The flames cast dancing shadows across the walls, making the room feel alive with some kind of ancient power. Her bed was lumpy and uncomfortable, with sheets that smelled faintly of mildew. The windows were covered with thick curtains that blocked out all light, making the room feel like deep, dark pits. And while we tried to take in the strangeness of the room, we found the woman lying on the floor unconscious. There was a strange symbol carved into her forehead, one that we didn't recognize. We knew that we had to leave. We grabbed our things and ran out of the cabin, not looking back until we were far away. It wasn't until later that we learned the truth. One of my friends remained adamant that we had to call the police and report everything that happened in that place. Although I didn't believe in spirits and ghosts, Karen's story and the strange occurrence that happened to her were tampering with my brain. I found myself believing that maybe they existed. I couldn't seem to forget the figure I saw in the kitchen also. However, the rest of my friends agreed that we would involve the police and report all that we saw. The police were called, and they investigated the cabin. It was then that they found evidence of the cult's presence, including strange symbols etched into the walls and floors. But what we learned next shook us to the core. Karen, our host, had been a member of the cult. She had used Airbnb to lure in unsuspecting victims, hoping to use them as sacrifices for the cult's rituals. But she had made a fatal mistake. She had offended the other cult members, and they had turned on her, carving the strange symbol into her forehead as a warning to others who might cross them. It was a shocking revelation, and one that left us all feeling betrayed and violated. Karen had seemed like such a kind and welcoming host, but in reality, she was a monster. The experience had shaken us to the core, leaving us with a newfound respect for power. Now, whenever I see an Airbnb listing that seems too good to be true, I can't help but think back to that fateful weekend. I know that some places are better left unexplored, and some secrets are better left buried. especially if they have a beautiful host that seems to be too nice. I can't get over the PTSD that my first experience awarded me.